It was May 19, 1992. A quiet suburban street in Long Island, New York. Gunshots broke the calm, and a mother collapsed on her own doorstep, bleeding, terrified, and gasping for air. Her name was Mary Jo Buttafuoco, and her shooter? A 17-year-old girl with long brown hair, tears in her eyes, and a motive that would shock America. This is the story of Amy Fisher, the teenage girl who fell in love, lost control, and became one of the most infamous names in true crime. She sat in the car, her hands trembling around the steering wheel. The gun beside her felt heavier than it should have. Outside, the Long Island sky was clear, the kind of ordinary suburban morning that gives no hint of what's coming. Amy Fisher was only 17, but her mind was a storm, a mixture of love, anger, shame, and confusion. She believed she was about to reclaim her life, to make someone finally listen. But what she was truly doing was setting fire to everything she'd ever known. Amy grew up in Merrick, a quiet middle-class neighborhood on Long Island. Her parents were the kind of people who believed in hard work and appearances. Her father owned a small auto body shop. Her mother was devoted but distant. Amy wasn't abused, neglected, or poor. She was just restless. She wanted something bigger than what her world offered. In her diary, she once wrote that she didn't want a normal life. She wanted drama, danger, something that made her feel alive. And that feeling came the day she met Joey Buttafuoco. He was twice her age, loud, confident, the kind of man who knew how to make people laugh. Joey owned a small auto repair shop not far from where Amy lived. Her car broke down one day, and fate, or maybe something darker, brought her to his door. He flirted with her, lightly at first, the kind of harmless teasing older men think they can get away with. But Amy was 16, impressionable, and hungry for attention. She laughed too much, stayed too long, and returned even when her car didn't need fixing. Joey saw what she wanted: validation, affection, danger, and he gave it to her in just the right doses. A phone call here, a ride home there. Then it turned into something more. They began meeting secretly, away from prying eyes. He told her he was unhappy, that his wife Mary Jo didn't understand him. He said Amy made him feel young again, alive again. And she believed him. For Amy, Joey wasn't just a lover. He was the man who made her feel seen. For Joey, Amy was a fantasy, a story he told himself to feel powerful. It was an affair built on imbalance, one person dreaming, the other pretending. But soon, fantasy started to collide with reality. Amy wanted Joey to herself. She wanted him to leave his wife, to make their secret something real. But Joey laughed it off. He never meant for it to go that far. Every lie he told to protect himself was another spark on the fire inside Amy. She began calling him constantly. She followed him. She told her friends she was in love, that one day he'd leave his wife for her. They didn't believe her. They called her naive. But Amy was convinced she was fighting for love. By 1992, that love had turned into obsession. Joey had started to pull away. He told her to stop coming by the shop. He told her to grow up. But Amy couldn't. She'd built her whole sense of worth around him. Without Joey, she was no one. And so her pain found a target: Mary Jo Buttafuoco. She started talking about her constantly, blaming her for the way Joey was drifting away. "She's the reason he's unhappy," Amy said. "She's the reason he won't be with me." In her mind, Mary Jo wasn't a person anymore. She was an obstacle, something that had to be removed. On May 19, 1992, Amy woke up with a plan. She borrowed a car from a friend. In her purse was a .25 caliber handgun she had bought days earlier. She told herself she only wanted to talk, to make Mary Jo understand. But deep down, she was trembling with something she didn't have the maturity to name: rage. When she arrived at the Buttafuoco home, her heart was pounding so loudly she could hear it. Mary Jo opened the door with a warm smile. She thought Amy was a neighborhood kid selling something. Amy hesitated, then said, "I'm here to tell you something about your husband." She handed her a t-shirt from Joey's auto shop, proof, she said, of their affair. Mary Jo frowned, confused, trying to make sense of it all. Amy's hands were shaking. She mumbled something about Joey lying, about him making promises. And then, as her anger took over, she raised the gun. The shot echoed through the neighborhood. Mary Jo fell instantly, the bullet shattering her jaw and embedding itself in her neck. Amy dropped the gun, panicked, and ran to the car waiting outside. Her accomplice drove off, tires screeching on the pavement. Inside the house, Mary Jo's teenage son called 911, screaming for help. She was bleeding, gasping for air, but alive. When police arrived, she was barely conscious, but she remembered the face of the girl who shot her. The next day, Amy Fisher's name was on every newspaper in America. The press called her the Long Island Lolita. To the tabloids, she was a teenage temptress, a dangerous girl who seduced an older man and shot his wife in cold blood. They plastered her face across magazines, talk shows, and headlines. For weeks, America was obsessed. Was she a victim or a villain? Was Joey a predator or just a fool? The story had everything the media loved: sex, scandal, and a pretty face. When Amy was arrested, she looked terrified, fragile, like a child caught in a storm she didn't understand. In the interrogation room, she cried, repeating the same words. "I didn't mean to kill her, I just wanted to talk." Meanwhile, Joey Buttafuoco stood in front of reporters, furious, defiant. He denied everything. He said Amy was crazy, a kid with an obsession. He said there had never been an affair. But police found photos, love letters, and hotel receipts that told a different story. The affair was real, and Joey had lied to everyone, including his wife. Amy was charged with attempted murder, but her lawyers argued she'd been manipulated and used. They said she was emotionally unstable, the product of grooming by an older man who had no business being in her life. But to the prosecution, it was simpler. She was jealous, angry, and wanted to eliminate her rival. The trial became a circus. Reporters filled the courtroom. Camera flashes blinded her as she walked in. America watched every move, every tear, every word. In the end, Amy took a plea deal, 5 to 15 years in prison for first-degree assault. Joey Buttafuoco later pleaded guilty to statutory rape and served just 6 months. Mary Jo, scarred for life, stood by her husband. She survived multiple surgeries, rebuilt her jaw, and eventually learned to smile again, though it was never quite the same. For years, she refused to leave Joey, saying she still loved him. Some called it forgiveness, others called it denial. Amy spent 7 years behind bars. She studied, read, and tried to understand how her life had fallen apart so quickly. When she was released in 1999, she told the press she just wanted to start over, to disappear. But the world wouldn't let her. Her name had become legend. TV producers wanted interviews, publishers wanted her story. And Amy, still craving the attention that once destroyed her, gave in. She wrote a memoir. She appeared on talk shows. She tried to tell her side, that she had been a lonely teenager manipulated by an older man who saw her as entertainment. But the public wasn't ready to forgive her. Once the world names you the Long Island Lolita, you don't get to rewrite the script. Joey and Mary Jo's marriage eventually crumbled. They divorced in 2003 after years of trying to hold together what was already broken. Mary Jo went on to become a motivational speaker, talking about survival, resilience, and the power of forgiveness. She spoke about how the human spirit could heal, even after being shot in the face by a child. Amy tried to live quietly, but controversy followed her. She appeared briefly in adult entertainment, something she later regretted deeply, calling it another way of losing control. She eventually became a mother, moving away from the spotlight, but the echoes of that day in 1992 never truly faded. Even now, decades later, her name surfaces whenever people talk about obsession, grooming, or media hysteria. The story of Amy Fisher isn't just about a girl and a gun. It's about power, and how it shifts, distorts, and destroys. Joey Buttafuoco was the adult he should have known better. Amy Fisher was a child, but one with agency, emotion, and a dangerous naivety. Both were caught in a toxic web of ego and desire, and Mary Jo was the collateral damage. The tragedy of this case is that it didn't have to happen. If Joey had drawn a line, if Amy had been older, if someone had stepped in when the signs were there. But no one did. The world watched a love affair turn into attempted murder and then into entertainment. Hollywood made movies, talk shows cashed in. America turned the pain of 3 people into a spectacle. In the end, everyone lost something. Mary Jo lost her peace. Amy lost her youth. And Joey lost his integrity, though some would argue he never had much to begin with. Looking back now, the case of Amy Fisher stands as a dark mirror to the culture that made her famous. She was a child in an adult's world, sexualized, sensationalized, and discarded. And maybe that's the real crime. Because beyond the headlines and the scandal, what remains is a story about a young girl who confused control for love, and an older man who mistook power for affection. And between them stood a woman who nearly died for both their lies.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, our sources are taking us back to 1992, the Amy Fisher and Joey Buttafuoco scandal.
Yeah, a name most people probably recognize, the Long Island Lolita.
Exactly. But we're not just here to rehash the tabloid headlines.
Yeah.
We want to use these sources to really dig into how the media, especially back then in the early 90s, kind of weaponized youth and sex and violence.
Right. It's a story that, even though it's over 30 years old now, it feels like a dark template for how true crime gets consumed today.
Yeah.
We're looking at this really complex situation. It starts on this quiet suburban street in Merrick, Long Island, just an ordinary morning.
Then boom, national spectacle.
Instantly. So our goal here really is to move past that spectacle, past the catchy nickname, and look at the colder dynamics underneath: obsession, power imbalances.
And the consequences, the real human cost, legally and personally.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Let's start with the people involved, because that central imbalance, I think, is key to the whole thing. You've got Amy Fisher, 17 years old when the shooting happened, but the relationship started earlier. The sources describe her as restless, really craving drama, maybe danger.
Yeah, impressionable is a word that comes up. And on the other side, there's Joey Buttafuoco. He's married, 35, so twice her age, owns an auto body shop, loud guy, confident.
And the way they met is almost mundane, right? Her car breaks down.
Yeah, she's 16, ends up at his shop. And for her, he sort of represented everything her suburban life wasn't. Excitement, maybe that kind of illicit glamour.
He seemed confident.
Very. And she was clearly looking for attention, validation. He provided that.
But it raises the question, how much real agency does a 16-year-old have in that dynamic? The sources say her background was stable, middle class.
Right. Not neglected or abused in the ways we might typically think.
But her diary apparently showed she really wanted out. She didn't want a normal life. Was that restlessness maybe a product of that environment itself, those expectations?
I think that's a fair reading. Yeah. She was looking for an escape hatch, and Joey, well, he offered one, but it was purely in the realm of fantasy for him. And that's the core dynamic the sources really nail down. Amy felt seen, truly validated by him. She mistook that feeling for love, for something real and deep.
Well, for him.
For Joey, it was a pure fantasy, something to make him feel powerful, maybe young again, alive. The sources are pretty brutal. They call it one person dreaming, the other pretending.
Dreaming versus pretending, that really sets the stage for the toxicity, doesn't it? Which brings us to part one, the toxic web. Because when she started pushing for more, the pretense just crumbled.
It had to. And that's when his actions become, manipulative. To keep the fantasy going without blowing up his actual life, he starts using those classic deflection tactics.
Like what?
Oh, telling Amy he's unhappy in his marriage, his wife Mary Jo doesn't understand him, Amy makes him feel young, all that stuff.
The standard script.
Exactly. But then when Amy actually suggests, hey, maybe you should leave Mary Jo, the sources say he just laughed. Like, whoa, he never meant for it to go that far.
Wow. So he was actively managing her expectations downwards while still feeding the fantasy.
Right. And for Amy, when he eventually tries to pull back properly, it wasn't the end of his fantasy. It was a huge betrayal of her reality, the reality she thought they shared.
And every one of those lies he told to protect himself
Became, as one source put it, another spark on the fire inside Amy. The rejection didn't just hurt. It ignited something dangerous.
She started calling constantly, right? Following him.
Relentlessly, yeah. And in her mind, she'd convinced herself she was fighting for their love. Even when her friends were apparently saying, look, this is getting obsessive, this isn't healthy.
She saw them as naive, maybe.
Or just didn't want to hear it. Because the sources really trace how, by early 1992, the dynamic shifted completely. Joey explicitly tells her, stop coming to the shop, grow up.
But she couldn't just switch it off.
No, because she'd built her entire sense of self-worth around his attention, his validation. When that was withdrawn.
The pain needed somewhere to go.
Exactly. And it found an external target, Mary Jo. In Amy's mind, Mary Jo stopped being a person. She became the obstacle. The only reason Joey was pulling away.
That's a terrifying shift in thinking.
It really is. From feeling rejected to deciding that the perceived source of the rejection, this obstacle, just had to be removed.
And the speed of it. Before we get to the actual crime on May 19th, the sources show she goes from that rejection to buying a handgun in just days.
Yeah, that speed is chilling. It suggests it wasn't purely impulsive, right? Not just a crime of passion. There was planning involved, calculation, an attempt to regain control, maybe.
She borrowed a car, bought the .25 caliber gun. did she know what she was going to do?
Well, the sources suggest she was telling herself one thing, I just want to talk to Mary Jo, make her understand. But her actions, her state, apparently she was trembling with rage when she got there. The intent seems pretty clear in hindsight.
Okay, so part 2, May 19th, 1992. The crime itself. She gets to the Buttafuoco house.
And the scene is just jarringly normal at first.
Yeah.
Mary Jo opens the door thinking Amy's maybe selling something for school. She even had a warm smile, according to reports.
Just a normal suburban interaction.
Yeah.
Until it wasn't.
Right, because Amy doesn't just start shooting. There's this really unsettling moment first. She tries to present evidence, proof of her connection to Joey. She tells Mary Jo she's there about her husband, and then she hands her a t-shirt from Joey's auto shop. Like, see, this is real.
Forcing the acknowledgement, making Mary Jo see the affair before the violence.
Exactly. And the sources describe that moment, Mary Jo frowning, processing this awful information, and then Amy's rage just spills over. She raises the gun.
The shot hit her in the head.
Shattered her jaw. The bullet lodged in her neck. Devastating injury.
And Amy
panicked, dropped the gun, fled with whoever drove her there. It all happened incredibly fast.
But Mary Jo survived.
Amazingly, yes. She was severely wounded, barely conscious, but she survived. Her teenage son called 911. And crucially, despite everything, she remembered Amy's face. She identified her.
Which means the police knew who they were looking for almost immediately.
Right. And that throws us straight into part 3, the media spectacle. Because the fallout wasn't just local news. It was instant, it was national, it was brutal.
Amy Fisher's face was suddenly everywhere. And the nickname.
The Long Island Lolita. The press latched onto that immediately. It was reductive, sexualizing, and it stuck.
And the narrative was set almost instantly, wasn't it? The media wasn't just reporting, they were crafting a story.
Oh, absolutely. They painted her as this teenage temptress who shot the wife in cold blood. That framing was incredibly effective.
Because it focused all the attention on her, the bad girl.
Exactly. It made her the villain, which conveniently obscured the role of the older married man who'd been having an affair with a minor.
It was the perfect tabloid storm. Sex, scandal, violence, a pretty young face.
America was completely hooked. Everyone had an opinion. Was she a victim? A villain? Was Joey a predator? Or just some fool caught up in something?
And then you have the investigation, the conflicting stories.
Right. Amy, when arrested, looked terrified, fragile, apparently kept crying, saying, I didn't mean to kill her, I just wanted to talk.
But Joey's reaction was totally different.
Night and day. He was furious, defiant, went straight on the offensive in front of the cameras, denied the affair completely, called Amy crazy, just some kid with an obsession.
But the police were finding evidence that blew his story apart, weren't they?
Oh yeah, pretty quickly. They found photos, love letters, explicit ones, hotel receipts, the whole thing. It directly contradicted his denials.
So while he's publicly calling her crazy, the proof showed he was lying. Lying to the police, lying to the public.
Which set the stage for this absolute media circus in the courtroom. Cameras, reporters everywhere.
And Amy's defense went with the grooming angle.
They argued she was emotionally unstable, yes, but also, crucially, a victim of statutory rape, groomed by an older man who exploited her fixation.
While the prosecution focused purely on the violence.
Attempted murder, jealousy, a calculated act. They downplayed the context of the affair.
And this is where that unequal accountability really hits home. The outcomes.
Stark doesn't even cover it. Starkly imbalanced.
Amy took a plea deal, right?
Yes. For first-degree assault, she ended up serving 7 years in prison.
And Joey. For the statutory rape, which the evidence proved.
He eventually pleaded guilty, served just 6 months.
7 years for the assault that stemmed from the situation. 6 months for the statutory rape that created the situation.
It's staggering when you put it side by side like that. It really shows you how the system, maybe influenced by the media narrative, weighed the violent outcome far more heavily than the initial exploitation of a minor.
Especially when the media had already painted Amy as the villain.
Right. And then there's Mary Jo. Her response was just incredibly complex.
She stood by him after all that.
For years. Despite the shooting, the surgeries to rebuild her jaw, the confirmation of the affair, she stood by Joey. Some people saw it as this act of profound forgiveness.
But others?
Others saw it perhaps as deep denial. Maybe a way to hold on to the life she knew, rather than face the complete public demolition of her marriage. It's hard to judge.
Which leads us into the long-term aftermath, part 4. Because prison wasn't the end of the story. Amy gets out in 1999.
And she wanted to disappear, apparently. But she couldn't. Her name was too infamous, really. The Long Island Lolita label wouldn't let go.
She was trapped by it.
Completely. And maybe, still craving some form of that attention that ruined her life in the first place, she stepped back into the spotlight.
A memoir, talk shows.
Yeah, trying to tell her side, reframe the narrative, and then she made that brief controversial move into adult entertainment.
Which she later regretted.
Deeply, according to her own words. Called it another way of losing control. That's a sad kind of irony, isn't it? Trying to escape the sexualization by stepping into, another form of it.
Did she ever find peace?
It seems like she eventually did, yeah. Became a mother, moved away, sought anonymity, just tried to live a normal life, finally.
And the Buttafuocos. Mary Jo's resilience didn't save the marriage in the end.
No. Despite trying for years, the strain was just too much. They divorced officially in 2003.
And Mary Jo's path after that is quite remarkable.
It really is. She became a motivational speaker, but importantly, she didn't focus on the scandal. She focused on survival, on resilience, on healing, finding strength after unimaginable trauma.
So when we zoom out, what's the bigger picture here? The sources seem to argue it's fundamentally about power.
Yeah, power and how it shifts, how it distorts things, especially when the media gets involved and amplifies everything.
You have Joey, the adult with the power advantage, exploiting Amy.
Right. Then you have Amy. Yes, she had agency, but she was a child, dangerously naive, who reacted with violence when that exploitation turned to rejection.
And Mary Jo.
The completely innocent collateral damage in all of this.
And the ultimate tragedy maybe isn't just the crime itself, but how it all got turned into entertainment.
Instantly. You mentioned the media frenzy, but Hollywood jumped right in too. 3 TV movies came out almost immediately.
All focusing on the most sensational bits, obviously.
Of course. The sex, the violence, the Lolita angle. It just speaks volumes about the culture, doesn't it? The sources call the whole case a dark mirror to the culture that made her famous. A culture that sexualized a child, sensationalized her pain, and then...
just discarded her when the next big story came along.
Exactly. Moved on.
So wrapping this up, the core tragedy seems to be this awful confusion. Amy confusing control for love, Joey confusing power for affection.
I think that's a really good summary. And the ultimate takeaway from these sources, for me at least, isn't just the specifics of this one case. It's the template it created.
For how we consume true crime, how the media handles these stories.
Yeah, because Amy Fisher's name, that Long Island Lolita tag, it still comes up whenever we talk about grooming or obsession or media hysteria, decades later.
Which leaves us with a pretty uncomfortable question for today, doesn't it?
I think so.
Yeah.
In our world, which is arguably even more saturated with social media spectacle, how many people are we still treating like Amy Fisher?
Sexualizing them, judging them, turning their private pain into public entertainment?
And then just moving on. While maybe the real underlying power dynamics, the exploitation that goes largely unexamined, maybe even unpunished. Who gets labeled the villain and who gets labeled the victim, and who decides?